everybody. How's it going? All right, we got a little, come on, get a little pep. My name is Jennifer Stojkovic. I am so excited to be here in Philadelphia, which, in my opinion, may be one of the most underrated cities in America. The architecture here is some of the most beautiful I've ever seen. This is my first time at Expo East, but I'm a big fan of West, and I'm excited to talk to you about the future of food investing. What a time to talk about investing. Could I have picked a better year? All right. So first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm here. I originally started my career in Silicon Valley working with the post-2008 startup boom. So I worked with all of those companies that are on your phone today that have become commonplace, helped build startup innovation and policy work so that they could survive and thrive and change the way that we live. I thought 2008 was the worst time to start a company and the toughest time, but I think 2023 might prove otherwise. After that, I started Vegan Women's Summit. We started with 250 women in a room and moved to over 60,000 women all around the world. It is the biggest organization for women in the future of food, and I authored The Future of Food is Female, the #1 best-selling book on women in the food system. And lastly, if that wasn't enough, I decided, why not raise a VC fund in this generation's single worst year ever? And alas, I am here. Joyful Ventures focuses on pre-seed and seed investments in food. I'm excited to tell you more about what I've been seeing on the ground. I am in early and deep, planting the seeds for the companies that hopefully could eventually be on this floor and be in grocery stores across the world. You guys ready to get started? All right. So let's talk about the state of food. It's an interesting one out there, isn't it? We're really living in a tale of two worlds right now. So while we are seeing record amounts of money being spent on organic foods, specialty foods, we're seeing more and more consumers tell us that they're interested in investing in their health, cleaner labels, less ingredients. We're also seeing consumers tightening their wallets like never before. Food inflation is hitting Americans hard. 25% of consumers in America are on SNAP benefits now. It's really such a fascinating time as we build the future of food to think, how do we build companies and products that serve this increasingly bimodal population? As somebody that specializes in plant-based, let's talk about the elephant in the room. I like to call it the plant-based doom loop. Who here knows what I am talking about? Who has heard about the plant-based downturn? Come on. All right, yeah, a little bit shy here. So we saw record investments in the plant-based space during the pandemic, and now we are seeing things go down. It is true. With Deloitte's latest study, we do know that consumers are changing their view of plant-based meat. More and more consumers believe that plant-based meat is not as healthy as meat, and more consumers are believing that it is not necessarily more sustainable. Plant-based meat has taken the biggest hit. At the same time, however, plant-based dairy is growing like crazy. According to the FDA, this January, fluid milk consumption dropped to its lowest rate ever in history. Meanwhile, plant-based dairy is outpacing it year over year. And though we talk about cleaning up the label, it's too processed, the biggest misconception that I like to make sure to dispel when I have these conversations is this. At the end of the day, taste is king. always. And increasingly, the more we hear about the processed aspect of plant-based foods, the less we're really getting close to why the consumer is not buying them. Ultimately, we know that the taste is just not there for many consumers. If the taste is not there, the fact that on average we have a 20% price premium for plant-based means that it's going to be a real struggle to get somebody to buy a product that both tastes worse than the traditional and costs more. So that, my friends, is what is going on in the plant-based doom loop. So what is it looking like from an investment perspective? Who here invests in food? We have 3 investors in food in the whole room. Really? Nobody? Who here is a founder? Okay, looking for investors. Very good. Right place to be. So when we look at the PitchBook deal data, we can see that food investing peaked like crazy in 2021, unmistakably. We have seen a massive drop as we get into 2023. Almost all investing in this space, and generally in venture capital, froze with the SVB collapse. So when we had the Silicon Valley Bank collapse, it was at a time when valuations and inflation were already top of mind. And so for many investors, including myself, we did not see a VC firm cut a check for 2 quarters. Think about that for a second. The majority of food funds did not invest at all for the first half of 2023. So now we've got a lot of catch up to do. When we look at the deal activity overall, we can certainly see that mid-2021 was a huge peak. If you look a little earlier, there was a couple anomalies. That's Impossible Foods raising $500 million, spiked it a little bit. A few other kind of large whales in there. But generally speaking, it was quite a big peak and then a downturn. And when I say that this is what we're seeing across the board, this is what every VC deal category is looking like. So as you take a look at this for a moment, excluding the anomaly with a few of those raises, you can see that the food investing category is looking almost the exact same as the entire venture category. So if you look at crypto, if you look at all of the other industries that peaked and were all over the place during the pandemic, they look very similar as well. So yes, food is uniquely suffering right now when it comes to investments. It is relatively commensurate with the rest of the industry. Some of the trends that I'm seeing on the ground as an investor. So it's no surprise valuations are dropping. Of course, valuations are dropping across the board. What is interesting, though, is they're not dropping in every category. So looking at each of these lines, obviously venture overall peaked crazily with astronomical numbers, and that has dropped like crazy. But growth stage and mid-stage investments also downturn, largely related to the fact that the exit prospects are getting farther and farther away. With the exception of Instacart this week, nobody in food is really that interested in IPOing, and so it's becoming less and less appealing for these growth stage investments. But the one I want to point out to you is that teal line right there, that light blue line. That is seed valuations. Seed rounds have not dropped. I'll say that again. Seed valuations, even in this massive peaked environment of venture capital, have not dropped, which is very fascinating. We're seeing more and more deals that have higher seed raises, but there's less of them. So that's a really important thing. Depending on where you are in your investing or where you are as a founder, you still can make some great gains in seed. We're also seeing a lot less formal rounds. People are raising more and more money without a lead investor. I'm getting extensions, seed A, seed 2, seed Z. Everybody's making up a new extension round. And so we're seeing less and less of the formal rounds that are raised. Obviously, we're also seeing a lot of crowdfunding as well. We are seeing more and more corporate investors that are interested in some M&A deals. They see good valuations right now. We're seeing more food investment in Europe right now than we are in North America, which is quite interesting. One of the reasons for that is because the EU has put some pretty robust frameworks around climate emissions, and more investors in Europe are seeing food as a climate investment. In the United States, it's not the same. As someone with a climate fund, I can tell you that probably 90% of other climate investors I meet do not invest in food. This is despite the fact that food is a huge climate opportunity. Investing in plant-based protein is 11 times more impactful than an electric vehicle. It's 4 times more impactful than green building. It's 3 times more impactful than decarbonizing cement. And so if you are raising your round, think about how you can position your food as a climate investment. 50% of all venture capital worldwide that is going to be spent in this next decade is going to go to climate investing. So what are some of the rising categories? Nostalgia and retro foods. Who here has heard about Magic Spoon or Goodles? I know y'all have heard about Goodles because they are here at Expo all the time. I've seen Gal, I think, twice now at Expo West. This is a category that continues to grow as millennial consumers are getting more buying power because millennials love to see the foods that they grew up with the ease of preparation, but healthier, better for you ingredients. Magic Spoon actually raised one of the top CPG rounds of all of last year. And then Gal Gadot's Goodles just raised $13 million only a few weeks ago. So this category is hot. Functional foods. Everybody's talking about how can this food be better for me? What's the gut health? What type of health attributes can I get from the foods that I am eating? One of the things that's so interesting about the functional food category as it delves into wellness is the fact that we now have over $15 trillion in buying power in women 55 plus. Almost 30% of consumer buying power is now in older Gen X and baby boomer women. They got a lot of money to spend. And this is the healthiest, most active generation of its kind. And this is a massive category. That's why we're seeing collagen and all of these new health foods starting to surge across all demographics, but in particular, those women have been underserved for years, and they have the buying power to do it. We're also seeing a huge shift towards more Black, Asian, Hispanic, and minority-led brands. It's no surprise that this has been a massively underserved category. We are still seeing startups doing well, raising money. Folks like Fly by Jing has done a great job in this category. One of the things that people don't realize is that almost 20% of consumer buying power is now in minority-led homes. And while that might seem like a small fraction for now, in the last 30 years, that has grown by 6-fold. And with Gen Z being the most diverse demographic yet, you're already starting to see what this looks like. The fact that Gen Z has the lowest consumption of dairy milk is reflective of the fact that their generation has the most lactose intolerance yet. There are huge shifts that are coming with the younger generation and the products that they buy. We're also changing the way that we eat. This looks familiar to you. I'm sure you're seeing a lot of people creating content on the floor. More and more people are getting their diet and food advice from social media. In the United States, 50% of all consumers are getting their information of what to eat from social media. That's 1 in 2. Does anybody here follow anybody, any food influencers? Is anybody following any of those bloggers? I know, yeah, I see a lot of hands are raising. That's how we are increasingly getting our ideas of what we want to eat, what's good for us. This Washington Post article shows that even the sugar industry has been heavily involved with sponsoring dietitians and reaching millions and millions of consumers. The other thing that's changing about the way that we eat is where we shop. We are seeing more and more growth in dollar stores, if you can believe it. Dollar General is now the #1 fastest growing grocery store in America. And they have new concept stores, creating an aesthetic version of a dollar store. We're also seeing more private label. Good and Gather by Target, of course, is one of the shining stars there. More and more brands are being built in-house with large retailers. And lastly, omni-channel retail is everywhere. The average food brand is now increasing their technology investment by 7% year over year. So as we think about what this future entails, what is the X factor that could totally change the future of food investing and the way that we eat? Well, I have 2 ideas of what that X factor could be. Who here has heard of Ozempic? We got about 4 hands, 5 hands. Who here has not heard of Ozempic? Okay, this might be the most important conversation you hear today. Ozempic could forever change the way that Americans eat. It is a weight loss drug that is quickly becoming one of the top prescribed medications in this country. And as more and more people grapple with their weight, it addresses the obesity and epidemic around lifestyle diseases. And what happens with Ozempic is people snack less. And many investors and retailers are thinking now about what could a world of food and consumers look like with less snacking. Why does that matter? 27% of our consumer food category is snacks, with 70% of Americans qualifying for this drug. This could truly change the way that Americans eat. And more folks are thinking about this as they think about what the future retail situation could look like. The other X factor that I'll throw out to you, artificial intelligence. You're going to hear AI all day today, and the reality is we don't quite know how it's going to change the way that we eat. We do know that there's tremendous opportunity for AI to change R&D, innovation, recipe development, supply chain. It's yet to be seen what that transformation is going to look like for CPG and food, but we know that there's going to be a big change coming. In closing, I want you to think about what could that future food system look like? What are those X factors that we're not thinking about? That is the end of today's presentation. I've got time for, I think, 2 questions, if anybody would like to ask a question. Any thoughts? I see a lot of notepads going. Oh, we got one over there, in there.
One question. So much of the food, so much of the folks buying food are looking at natural and organics. How is Ozempic going to affect those folks?
They're looking for, sorry, what was the?
natural and organic, and how Ozempic will, what was the last?
Yeah, that's a
Affect
great
the folks
question.
in the market.
So we're seeing a lot of nutritionists and dietitians that have been weighing in on some of those changes. There is some early evidence that suggests that people are craving sweet and salty and highly processed foods less. Early addiction research is actually finding that Ozempic is helping people beat some of their addictions. So the assumption is that moving towards less of those sweets and some of those highly processed foods could potentially benefit some of the more natural and organic and whole foods. This is still very early though. This drug has only been around for about 2 years in the mainstream. There's one over here.
Thank you so much. That was just an excellent presentation. Do you by any chance have a version of this on YouTube or someplace where we could share all this great information with others?
This is the very first time I've ever done this presentation made specially for Expo, but I think it's live streamed, right?
Recorded, and we will have all of our recordings in the agenda posted within a week after the show.
Great.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Have a great show.